Jacques has Parkinson's disease. As if that weren't enough, every time he goes to pick up his prescriptions, there's bad news.
But
I don't have the 2 milligrams of Rekip. The manufacturer doesn't have any left, so it's going to be difficult to get hold of any.
Drugs that are absolutely essential for treating people with Parkinson's are often unavailable in France, brand-named or generic.
Every day we have to check what's out of stock and see if there's a generic equivalent. Then we have to find a lab that has some left, because when there's a shortage, the generic drugs quickly sell out.
Jacques starts feeling the effects of the lack of medication as soon as he reaches home.
For me, the biggest symptom is this, shaking. My left hand starts shaking. Just the fact that I was told that they don't know how long it will be until they receive the drugs makes me shake. I could do without all this. I have enough problems already with this bloody disease. I don't need this extra stress.
Interrupting treatment can put a patient's life at risk, and those with Parkinson's are far from being the only ones suffering from the shortages. All types of drugs are affected, the consequences of which could potentially be felt by the entire French population. Anti-infectives and vaccines, painkillers, cancer treatments, neurological products, or blood-based medicines used in the treatment of haemophilia. In total, 430 medicines are out of stock in France. Almost 11 million French people who suffer from a chronic disease pay the consequences of these shortages. That's 1 in 6 people. The French National Agency for Medicine Safety sounded the alarm a year ago and says the shortages are the result of a global production scale.
Drug manufacturing has become a global task. It's become very complex. The different stages of the production process have been scattered across the world. And the problem is that there's only one factory that makes the active ingredients.
But it's far from being an exclusively French problem. Globally, there's been a rapid increase in the demand for drugs, and manufacturers simply haven't been able to keep up. The economic framework of the pharmaceutical industry is also being blamed. In a bid to cut costs, the bigger companies have spread production to other countries. Over the last 40 years, the number of laboratories in France has more than halved. In 2017, there were only 271 left, and most of them were devoted to research. Active ingredients are now being produced in Pakistan, China and India, where regulations around production are attracting companies. But it comes at a cost. 20% of the output is unfit for consumption. Every step is carefully monitored. From the raw material to the finished product, the manufacturing process is in the hands of the subcontractors. If a single step goes wrong, the entire process is affected, leading to a shortage. The price of drugs is also a point of concern. Some in the field condemn the mercenary tactics of some companies at the cost of public health. They accuse them of inflating prices to make a bigger profit.
Pharmaceutical companies will keep producing the more expensive drugs, but nobody wants to keep making the older ones, the cheaper ones. So even if they aren't intended, shortages are inevitable. And if they deliberately create a shortage, it'll be to increase prices. It's scandalous. This is how the cancer treatment Bicnu went from 30 or 35 euros for 100 milligrams to 900 euros to 1,450 euros, following a year's shortage.
But France's pharmaceutical industry says that to claim that there's a ploy to increase prices is delusional.
Okay, first I want to reject this idea, this perception that's widely spread, that these shortages are being orchestrated on purpose to increase the price of medicine. This being said, it's true that we're dealing with production and supply chains at a globalized, international level. So pharmaceutical companies constantly have to decide how to dispatch their production, how much volume they allocate to this or that country. And when it comes to certain drugs, for instance, widely prescribed antibiotics that cost only a few euros in France, but the double in Germany, then companies can indeed consider distributing and allocating their stock depending on geographical criteria.
Companies consider drug prices in France to be too low, which could encourage them to send their stocks to other countries that offer a higher price. According to a report from the Senate, the issue could be solved by increasing prices, thereby also incentivizing companies to open manufacturing plants here.
The problem is that in France we have fixed prices, while in other countries they're sold for more. Taking into consideration the economic issue isn't anything new. I believe we need to take it into account, and perhaps drugs that are sold at a low price could benefit from a small increase and therefore be produced in our country.
If that happened, the state wouldn't be the only one to bear the costs. Patients may also have to dig deeper. France's pharmaceutical industry is worth over 54 billion euros. It's also the country's third largest export industry behind the aviation and automobile sectors. Solving the problem of shortages is therefore largely in the hands of the companies.